Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with veteran Omaha-born and New York City jazz guitarist Dave Stryker. He opened up about his third CD in a trilogy called 2019's 8-Track 3. He grew up in Omaha and moved to New York in 1980. After establishing himself in the local scene, he joined organist Jack McDuff's group for 2 years from 84 to 85. After leaving Jack, he went to Stanely Turrentine and joined his quintet. And from 1986 to 95, he played with the legendary saxophonist, and after 10 years of playing along with the tenor legend, it helped him realize the importance of having his own sound. And he's been working on that very busy career ever since. So get to know Dave and dig this interview, my friends.
So, Dave, hey, thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today, man. I appreciate it.
No problem.
So let's go ahead and dive into 8-Track 3, your latest 2019 CD. Talk to me about what your artistic vision for this process and project was.
This is a project I started, I think it was about 6 years ago. I had an idea of, well, you know, even since growing up in Omaha, when I first started playing jazz, playing a pop tune on a gig was nothing, was common. The guys that taught me how to, you know, took me under their wing. Back at that time, they would play, you know, a tune like Never Can Say Goodbye or Call Me or, you know, one of these kind of tunes. You Are the Sunshine of My Life and jazz them up. And then after I moved to New York and got with Jack McDuff and Stanely Turrentine for all those years, you know, they did the same thing. You know, they would throw in a tune like that. And it's a good way to connect to the listeners when they hear a melody they recognize, you know, done in a different way. They dig that. So, you know, and it's a way of bringing more people into the music. So what I would do, the same kind of thing years ago, I would throw in a tune like that on the set, and then I started saying, well, that's going to be on my next record. Dave Stryker plays the hits of the 8-track, ha, 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 you know. Except then people started coming up to me going, hey, when's that 8-track record coming out? I'm going to buy that. So it was like, okay, maybe I should do this. And so now we have a volume 3, and it's been a fun ongoing project for me in that, you know, picking tunes, finding tunes that I think I can, you know, put my own spin on and do our thing to, and people seem to like it, and we certainly do. So it's been a fun thing.
So let's go back to Omaha. Let's talk about your childhood growing up in Omaha and how you got involved with jazz. Give me kind of an idea.
I started out playing, I had an older sister who had all the Beatles records, and so early on I wanted to be a guitar player and started taking lessons like when I was 10. And by the time I was 12, I was playing in rock bands, got pretty good at, you know, rock guitar, and went to a jam session at the local union, and they were playing a song from my father by Horace Silver, and I got up there and sat in and just started playing my rock licks, and one of the guys came up to me and said, hey, you can't be playing all those rock licks, this is jazz. I was like, wait, what? So I you know, that's what, I didn't even know what jazz was. I went to the record store, I said, I got to buy a couple of jazz records, and I went in the back, and somehow I walked out with a Coltrane, My Favorite Things, and a George Benson record. So I just got hooked. Started, you know, listening to the records. That's how I learned how to play, and that's how, you know, most of the greats really learn just from listening. And then my friends and I started playing, you know, learning tunes, and like I said, a local sax player took me under his wing, and I started playing with him. He showed me standards, and just got hooked listening to Wes Montgomery and George Benson, all the greats.
Just talk to me about that move, you know, from your Midwestern roots in Omaha to New York City in 1980. What was that move like for you, and how did things start in New York for you as far as getting into the scene?
Well, actually, from Omaha, I moved out to L.A. for a couple of years in around 78 because there was a guy from Omaha named Billy Rogers who was he spent some time in Kansas City too. One of the great guitar players that most people have never heard of, but he was an incredible guitar player. Could play like George Benson at a young age, and so he was I went out. He was out there. I wanted to be around him and another guy from Omaha named John Maller, another great organ player, piano player. And so I knew them, so that's why I went out to L.A. and I, hung out there a bit. And Jimmy Smith used to have a club there called Jimmy Smith Supper Club. And every Monday was a jam session. I would go to that. And that's where I met a bunch of people. I met Jack McDuff there, and he said, if you come to New York, look me up. So when I came to visit a friend of mine, Jorge Nila, that had moved to New York when I moved to L.A. We had played in the same bands. And I was going to stay 2 weeks in New York, and I stayed 4 months. Because I realized that New York was where it was at, I was like going out every night and hearing George Coleman and all these great players, and Jim Hall, Ron Carter. Went up to Harlem like Jack McDuff said, ended up playing with Jack for 2 years. And when we weren't on the road, we had a steady 4-night-a-week gig at a place called Dude's Lounge in Harlem. And a lot of guys would fall by there. Lonnie Smith, Jimmy Smith, George Benson, Stanely Turrentine, Lou Donaldson. So once I left Jack, Stanley asked me to join his band, and I stayed with Stanley for about 10 years.
Respectively, what did you learn from both Stanley and Jack? First of all, Jack, that was, early on when you got to New York, and then later on, what did you learn from Stanley?
Yeah. Well, the thing with Jack, when as a guitar player, when I got in the band, he'd had Grant Green, George Benson, Pat Martino. So when I got in the band, he finally got a good guitar player,
Yeah.
No, but you can imagine a little bit of pressure there from, getting that gig. But the fact is, if you got the gig, you deserve it, and then you got to just take care of business. So I learned a lot. I learned about playing with a good pocket, a good feel, playing with soulfully, playing strong. To follow guys like Jack when they take a solo, or you got a deal. So you had to step up to the plate. I learned that, and I learned you learn that. You learn also things not to do, and it was a great learning experience. Even though it was a lot of dudes at the time, traveling around in a van all over the country and getting screamed at by Jack a lot. It was a really, really great experience. And Stanley was the same kind of thing. A guy you can tell in 2 notes. Somebody who played with heart, played with soulfulness in their playing that spoke to people, and people would come out to the gigs, and he had fans, and he had hits, and he knew how to put on a show and have an audience into it with him and go home happy. And these were all invaluable lessons to learn, that hopefully I've been able to absorb and try to put into my own music. But, a guy like Stanley, 2 notes, who it is. Same with, all the greats, Kenny Burrell, George Benson, Grant Green, Miles. They all have a sound, and that's something we all strive for. So those are some of the things that I took away from those gigs.
So how long do you think it took for you to really find your true voice on your instrument? Did it happen early on? Did it evolve over time? When did that happen for you?
Definitely, it's an ongoing thing. When you start out, you're listening to your heroes and emulating, and eventually, some of your own stuff starts to come through, because it has to. Everybody is unique, Every person is a unique being, and whether you play music or you do any kind of creative thing, whether it be a painter or a writer, actor, anything, you're unique in your own way. So it just sometimes takes years of playing, in my case, lots of gigs, and I started writing music early on, and that's another part of your voice. But yeah, I feel like it was starting to I was starting to find my voice and have my own sound. I guess after about 20 years, I don't know. But I feel like once I started recording, in other words, I started recording. First record was in 1988, and I felt like I had something to say at that point, and kind of had my own sound, and I've just kept building on that.
So you have had kind of a direct connection to someone that came from Kansas City with Kevin Mahogany, and I just kind of want to know what was that partnership like? What was it like to work with him?
It was wonderful, Joe. I mean, did you know Kevin?
Yeah, I did not. Unfortunately, I was actually close to interviewing him, and I never got a chance to.
He was the nicest guy, big heart, never, just a sweetheart. I don't know how else to put it. And, one of the best singers, I think, ever, especially at doing a blues or doing a standard. He had the most gorgeous instrument. And I was lucky he called me up right after I left Stanley, and he had just got his record deal with Warner Brothers, so I helped co-produce his records on Warner Brothers, and started being his arranger, and we went all over the world playing music, and great friends. He just called me out of the blue. He had heard me with Stanley, but he also knew we had a connection in the Midwest. We were about the same age, and I miss him every day. I just heard him on the radio the last couple of days, and beautiful cat, man. His wife had passed a few months before him, and that really took the wind out of his sails. I actually played a gig with him a few weeks before he passed, and we sat in the diner talking about old times and what we were going to do in the future, and so it was kind of a shock when he left, but he was a big guy and had health issues with his weight and everything, and caught up with him.
Yeah.
Beautiful cat.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all I've ever heard. So you've been at this game for a long time. Countless recordings, countless compositions. You've been all over the world. How do you feel about where you're at as a musician and where you're at with your life and what you've seen so far?
I've been lucky. I mean, as musicians, there's a lot of dues to be paid, and early on you wonder if you're ever going to catch a break, and then you realize, you're just lucky to be doing something you love and playing music, and, a lot of times you have to do, maybe do jobs you wouldn't want to do, even non-musical jobs. You do what you got to do to survive. And sometimes you get, the chips fall and you get a nice opportunity and you try to make the best of it. And I've got to see places all over the world that I would have never got to see. So many countries I've gone to, and all over the States, everywhere, because of music, and met a lot of great people, and I think I've brought some joy to a lot of people with my music, and so I think it's even though there's a lot of what we call paying dues and disappointment, and you just have to kind of. I have a lot of gratitude for having this opportunity to play music and play with such great people, and try to keep that in mind when I'm if I get down about it's a tough business, because you always think, well, why so and so got this and I don't have that, but that's just human nature. But you can't do that. You have to just be the best you can be, and keep striving ahead.
So you've clearly dedicated your life to jazz. You love it. And I want to know this. Why do you love jazz?
The only music where improvisation is such a huge part of it. We learn the standard tunes, and we learn the harmony and the chord structure, and then we're free to compose on the spot, which is improvisation. And being inspired by all the greats, all the records I listen to coming up, all the Blue Note, all the Coltrane, all the Miles, Sonny Rollins, all the McCoy Tyner, Herbie, just totally inspired by it. And it's I just feel like with when you're improvising, you certainly have certain you're speaking a certain language, so you're going to have certain phrases and sentences you say, but you're trying to strive every time to maybe tell a little bit different story, and you never know what will happen. Sometimes it's your story's it's a great story. Other times it's okay story. The more you play, it's okay becomes a pretty good. That's why. And also it just feels good. I like to tap my foot and bob my head to music, and when Jimmy Cobb and Paul Chambers are locking into some quarter notes, I just love the feeling.
So the one thing that's as an educator, you can respect this, that, there's a lot of things that educate us musically, and one of the things that's huge is like the live shows we see. What's one of the first live jazz shows you witnessed that really blew you away?
I remember Kenny Burrell coming to the University of Nebraska at Omaha when I was a kid, and I remember when I was in high school, the little jazz festival came through town with Clark Terry, his group, and Jerry Mulligan's group, and Gary Burton's group, who had a young Pat Metheny from Lee Summit, Missouri on guitar, who was he's about 3 or 4 years older than me, and he was already playing amazing. And so I got to meet him at that early age, and we've remained friends. He's doing okay. I'm glad to see that his career is doing okay. I said, hey, man, can I get a lesson? And he said, sure. So I went to the Roadway Inn in Omaha and took a lesson with Pat Metheny when I was 16 and he was 19. And he's like, man, I got my best friend. Wait till you hear him. He's a really good bass player. His name's Jocko. And he says, here's a tune that I just wrote. It's going to be on my next record. And he played me Omaha Celebration, which is on Bright Side of Life. Started playing me all the tunes on that record, and about a year later, that record came out, and then we know what happened after that.
Yeah.
And then I came down to Lawrence, Kansas, a year later to see Gary Burton right as Pat was about getting ready to leave. And I'll never forget, because I'm standing kind of over in the corner, and everybody's gathered around Pat after the show, talking to him, and he sees me in the corner, and he looks over, he goes, hey, Dave, what's up? So, as a young guitar player, to have somebody like Pat all of a sudden recognize you and know your name, man, it meant a lot, That's the way he is. He's a beautiful cat, and so that was a great experience, yeah.
Yeah, right on. So my final question to you is this. Everyone has a perception or their version of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your students, your fans, but you know who you are best. Tell me, who do you think you are?
That's a hard one. I feel like I'm just in the happy to be one of the musicians that gets to play and record and pick up an instrument every day and try to make some sounds on it. And some people seem to enjoy it, and I feel blessed from that. And I've been able to make a living, from doing this all these years. And also started getting into teaching, as you mentioned, the last few years. I've been at Indiana University. This will be my 7th year coming up. Commute out there from New Jersey. I teach at Montclair State here. So I've done a lot of teaching, and I'm happy to pass it on, like it was passed on to me. So all those things are part of who I am. I try to be a nice person. I try to help others out. I try to help the young cats coming up, and I try to just be a good person. And I guess that's it.
Right on. Perfect. Dave, thank you for opening up about the latest album. Good luck with it. Thank you for all the music, man. I appreciate it.
Well, I sure appreciate you, the support of, you and all the radio stations, and I appreciate you spinning it, and I hope you guys are digging it there, and I hope to see you in Kansas City one of these days soon.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview. where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Omaha, Kansas City, New York City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Dave for his time, his music, and his stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.